Good morning. We're up to today trying to do Yom Alf, but we are in the middle of Tesla Bays. Where we are was the story yesterday we just did of Daniel Bar Katina, and he was proving the point that we said in the pasuk. When the pasuk said, "Shalom Hashem Matar Beis Malkish," he asked Hashem for rain, the time of the end of the rain. Hashem Oisach Azizim, Hashem makes these thunder clouds. Matar Geshem Yitain Lahem Laish Esav Asada, and come down and sound like the rain for a single person to a single part of the field. And we had a good story of Daniel Bar Katina, who was essentially, obviously, a big tzaddik, and he would go around to his fields and check them out every day. And he would say, "Oh, I need some rain over here in this furrow," and it would mamish rain over there. Fine. So the Gemara now asks on this pasuk, "My Hashem," so about 3 lines down in the wide lines. "My Hashem chazizim." What does it mean that Hashem makes these thunder clouds? Some Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, "Melamed shakol tzaddik v'tzaddik Hakadosh Baruch Hu oislei chaziz b'fnei atzmai." It's like Hashem. This pasuk is teaching us that Hashem is doing for each tzaddik. Hashem is making like his own personal, his own private, thundercloud. So that is to say, this kind of, like we saw on Testament, we saw that that the mother can come Shvil Yachid. Now we're seeing this played out. That if a person is on such a level, he gets like his own private, his own personal reign. So the Gemara says, okay, I understand, but my chazizim, what do you mean when it says in the pasuk? It sounds like we're talking about many of them. These thunder clouds sounds like it's plural. So the Gemara says, Amrav Yehuda Parchos. What it means is these are fast clouds. There's a lot of them. There's a number of these, clouds that are out there. I guess they're all busy doing their various, missions to go provide personalized rain. Fine. So Amrav Yehuda Siman Lemadar Parchos. Rabbi Yochanan now says a general interest matter. He says that the sign of rain is these sort of fast clouds moving. You must have seen this before, right? When you go outside, sometimes you see there's a thick cloud cover, right? You see like thin clouds that's moving around. That's the parchos. These thin clouds that's moving around, moving very quickly, those are parchos. Rabbi Yochanan says if you see these parchos, if you see these kinds of like thin clouds moving around, that's siman that there's going to be rain. My parchos. So the Gemara wants to understand, what does this mean, these fast clouds? Amar Papa, Avya, Kalishta, it's like the thin clouds, Tuti Avya Semichta, like underneath the thick clouds, which I think everyone here must have seen, right? It's a very interesting phenomenon when you see like different color clouds, the different speeds that they're moving. Rabbi Yochanan is saying when you see those kind of like thin, wispy clouds flying around, and you got thick clouds, behind it, you don't see it the reverse way because the thick clouds would cover up the thin clouds. But the reverse, so maybe it is there as a phenomenon. I have no idea. But when you see this thick cloud cover and underneath there's like thin clouds, that's a sign that there's going to be rain. Fine. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Nehelia Mekame Mitra. If you have like a drizzle before rain, so Asi Mitra is a sign that there's going to be rain. Basar Mitra, when you have a nice Gezinta rain and then you have like a thin drizzle. So then Pasuk Mitra is usually a sign the rain's finishing. You have to be aware of the whole time, otherwise how would you know? But obviously what we're saying is that when there's a drizzle starting, it could be a sign that there's going to be a big rain coming, and when you have a drizzle, it could be that the rain is ending. Yeah, so says the Gemara, Mekai Mitra, Asi Mitra, when there's small drizzle coming before the rain, so how is it a sign that it's that there's going to be a rain coming? It's like a sieve, right? If you think about a sieve, right? What do? Right, when you first pick it up, right, some stuff pop out, but not a lot. When you shake it, that's when you really make the difference. So that first thing when you pick it up, that little bit that comes out, that's the drizzle that's coming before the rain. And obviously, when you're going to shake it, there's going to be the major sort of chaff coming out that's going to separate it out. So that's the sign one way. The other way is a very interesting sign. It says the Gemara the Basar Mitra Pasuk Mitra. I didn't know that when the rain is finishing, You have a little bit of a drizzle also. What's the sign for that? For Simone, easy. Literally, Rashi explains that it's goat droppings, goat dung, that it makes, I guess, feces number two in a thick way in the beginning, and then it becomes thin at the end. I'm not really sure if that's unique to a goat or like why specifically. I have no idea. I've never become such an expert in animal husbandry, but we'll leave it on the side. Anyhow, so that's the Gemara says the signs to explain the rain that comes in a drizzle before a big rain or after a big rain. These are also signs that one can utilize in understanding this two different types of drizzle. Fine. Now we go to two dots, the new Gemara. Ula ikla lebavel. Right. So you remember we've said many times in Shas there were many people who used to move around right between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael. Right. This was already from the very earliest of times. Um, Even though the majority of the Jewish people did not come back to Eretz Yisrael by the Binyan by Hasheni, most of them stayed in Bavel or wherever else they had gone, um, and they were castigated for that certainly. But nevertheless, there was a steady stream, like of caravans that would travel between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael. So many times you have the Gemara Kiyasa Ravim, Kiyasa Rav Dimi. The people used to travel back and forth. Hill himself, before he becomes the Nessa in Eretz Yisrael, was called Hillel Bavli because he came up from Bavel, right? So we have a situation now with the reverse commute. So Ula Ikal Bavel. Ula was coming to Bavel. He came from Eretz Yisrael. Chazda Parchos. So he saw these fast clouds, right? Which we just said is what? A sign that there's going to be rain, right? When you have these like wispy clouds moving quickly, it's a sign of rain. So Amar Lahu, so he said to somebody or the people around, he says, "Oh, Panumani." He says, everybody should put in their, stuff. Bring it in. It's going to be rain. The Hashta Asimitra. It's obviously going to be a lot of rain, so everybody should get prepared for that. So L'Saif Asimitra. In the end, the rain didn't come. So Amar, so Ula says, "Yech le'meshakir bavloi hachi meshakir mitrayo." No, he says, not surprised. The same way that the Babylonians, bunch of shakranim, they lie all the time. So their clouds are also liars, right? So we have this two times we have this two ways in Chazal. Right? If you look at the Gemara in Shabbos, Lamed Aleph, the Gemara over there says a bunch of mices, right, about Hillel. Right? So you have the guy, right, had a bet. Can he make Hillel angry? Right? You remember the Gemara? So he waits till Friday. Hillel's going to the shower. And Hillel comes out of the shower, yeah. No, my kid, what can I do for you? I would like to understand why the Babylonians have thick forehead. So it's a good question, actually. It's the weather. No, I think that was the bad midwives or something. Back 5 minutes later, Phil comes out of the shower. Yeah, I have a very pressing matter. Yeah. Why do the Africans have thick feet? I have no idea if this is scientific, whatever. So it's a very important question. It's something about the sands and the lands and dunes. And yeah, so another question. Why does this one have the foreheads like this? Oh, fantastic question. I'm not saying the science should, but if the answers make any sense, the questions make any sense, forget all that. But you see in every one of the answers that the physical manifestations were caused by the areas that they were in. There was something in the areas that they were in that caused these people to be the way they are. And if you look in the Chazals and you look in Bereshit Rabbah by Parshas Noach, when it's talking about the depravity, the generation of Noach, that deserve the Mabul. The marriage goes on and on, that the animals, the world became depraved because they were following what? Human beings. The people were so depraved, so the animals became depraved. The world becomes depraved. On the basis of what? The humanity. So you see in two ways. On the one hand, the humanity is affected by the world around it. On the other hand, the humans can affect the world around it. It goes both ways. So over here, Ula is saying that the clouds have become affected by the humans. The humans are liars, so the clouds became liars too. Yeah, yeah. So the more Ula Ikla Bava, another Ma'aseh when Ula came there Bava from Eretz Yisrael. Chazi Molitzina the Tamer Bezuza. He saw mamish like you can get dates very cheap. He saw like a whole bag of dates. You could get it for $1. Mamish zuz, nothing. So he said, Omar Molitzina the Dusha. But sometimes in Shas you see that these dates are called honey, right? When we say in Pasuk, we talked about the Maseches Brachas in relation to Kedimus of Brachas. We said the Pasuk is Eretz Zavas Chol V'Dvash. I said Eretz Chitus Erev Yefnes and Erev Remind Eretz Zeh Shem Dvash. We said that the Kedimus is not necessarily the what you might think. It says Eretz 2 times. So in the second Eretz, the things that are listed closer to the Eretz, even in the second Eretz, are ahead of the Kedimus wise of what it says in the first, right? So you have Eretz, Chita, Us'ara, V'Gefen, Us'ena, V'Rimain. So what's the last one on that list? It's Rimain. Right? And then you have Eretz, Zeis, Shemen, Udvash. So Zeis, Shemen, and Dvash comes before what? Comes before Rimain. So they would have Kedimus, right? So we're not getting into those nafkamidas now. But for our purposes now, so one of the things that we said over there was one of the Zayaminim is dates. Which one is dates? Listen, Eretz Chito, Sa'ira, V'Gefen, Usaina, V'Rimai, Eretz Zay, Shemen, Udvash. Where's the dates? No, which one is the date? Answer is Dvash. Dvash is the date. Why? Because and that's when we talk about the land is flowing with milk and honey. Eretz Zavas Chol Dvash. So people make a mistake. They're thinking, what is the honey? Honey's not from the bees, honey's from the dates. So that's the lashon of the Gemara over here. We call the dates Malitzina the Duvsha Mezuzah, right? He said, Ula said when he saw that the dates are so cheap, he says, "Wow, they're selling a bag of dates," but he calls it Duvsha, he calls it honey because of this reason, right? It's synonymous with honey. That's that's what we find in the pasuk, yeah. So he says, Omar Mullet Sina the Duvsha Bezuzah, they're selling mamish dates so cheap, they're selling it's so inexpensive, asking by Raisa, and they don't learn more. What's wrong with these people? Meaning, life is easy. You can have a nice life, be successful, and you should spend more time learning. You don't have to work so hard, clearly. So the Gemara says, Belel Yatsaru. At night he had problems. Rashi says he had shulshul, right? When you eat a lot of dates, it's I guess a lot of fiber, whatever it was, he's running to the bathroom. So Omar Marlit Sina de Sakina Bezuza says they could buy a bag of knives for $1. In other words, this is such painful stuff, even though it's so sweet, it's so painful. Ubavloi aski by Raisa, and they still managed to learn. Meaning this stuff that it seems cheap and it seems nice, but it causes you massive intestinal issues, and they still manage to learn. Wow, amazing. Obviously, what the answer was eating with moderation. Right? If you eat it just because it's so sweet and delicious, you can have a lot of problems. But you have to do it with moderation. Yeah. But this idea about learning and being able to have a parnasa is a fundamental. Right? We talked about it in Brachas on Hey, right? That I say to Russell Keva, right? That if you're going to make the Torah the main thing and the working arai, and we explained that that doesn't mean Keva and arai that in terms of hours. It's not like today a person could decide to be like Maimonides and open up his store for 3 hours and say, I expect to have to pay my tuition, send my kids to camp, and have enough food on the table, pay the mortgage, and having life insurance and health insurance. And after 3 hours, shut the door, and that's it. That's not how it works. We're not making miracles here. Unless you're some sort of a day trade or whatever, that's not how life works. So, what does it mean? Asset Russell Keva. Mulachtan Ara means fundamentally, where's your height? Where's your mind? You might be working for more hours a day than you're learning. But if the Teirosla is Keva and Malachtan is Ara, meaning what's more fundamental, taking up the real estate in your brain, if that is Torah, so then you're on the right track. And that's what Ulu was initially shocked. If these people have such an easy life because you're able to make a nice living, have great food, and it's relatively cheap. So you don't have to work so hard. you could have a good life. So why aren't they learning more? Meaning it's clear that their malachtan is not alright, and it should be more alright given how easy life is. But when it comes down, he realizes that actually this is not so simple. So that's when he's surprised at how much they do manage to learn. He does realize that it is what Teras is kava for them. Yeah. The other one, Tanya Blazer Emer. Kol Elam Kule Mimi kindness Hushaisa. Again, without getting into the science Shabai, Blazer says that all of the world is being getting water from the waters of the kindness, usually understood as the Atlantic. Right? The pasuk tells in the beginning of Bereshis that there was like a major stream that came, and that fed all the earth. If you're right that the waters from the Atlantic are where we're getting all the water from the rain, then meluchanein, it's going to be very salty. It's going to be salty water. He says, no, they get sweet in the clouds. That's Rabbi's opinion. Rabbi Shua says, no, the waters that we get as rain, they're all coming from the Mayim Yanim. Everybody remembers that there was some sort of a Mayim Yanim and a Mayim Tachtonim, and Hashem was Mavdil and the Rakia, Bein HaMayim, between the waters. So Rabbi Shua says the waters really coming that we have as rain come from the Mayim Yanim. As they have in the pasuk says that the water from the heavens that will give to drink for us water down here. So Elamani Mekayim Eid Yalam and Arsa. How does that fit with the pasuk there in Bereshis? It sounds like there's one major stream of water that comes out to give water to the earth. That teaches us that the clouds go up to the heavens. They go up to the rakia, they go up to the firmament of Peschen Pian night, and they open up their mouths like imagine a flask opening up its mouth to get filled up. And and they get all the rain. They get all the water from the Mayim Layan. Remember, Yazaiku Mitar Leidai, right? The Yazaiku Matar, the water is distilled Leidai into vapor. Umnukavais Hain Kechikar. Right, and then it sprinkles down like a sieve. And then it comes out and sprinkles out onto the ground. Yeah. So what are we saying over here in terms of the science? I don't think there's a question that Blazer is correct. From everything I've ever read, it sounds like the way rain actually comes. Again, we're not talking about desalination, but the regular rain is the waters, Atlantic, Pacific, wherever it may be, but the waters of the ocean, which is what Belezer is saying, essentially become clouds. Right? As the water evaporates, it becomes into clouds. When enough of it evaporates and temperature is right, it becomes clouds. And that's why it's sweet, because when the evaporation occurs, right, so the evaporation, the salt is heavy. The salt doesn't go up into the clouds. The salt stays down below, and that's where the water is sweet. That's what it means when the Gemara is talking about mamtikin ba'am that gets sweet in the clouds. He's not wrong, but we understand today that the way it happened was evaporation, and then the water in the clouds is sweet. It's not salty, and that's how it can come down. And that is the general understanding of how rainwater comes down to us, and that's the cycle. It comes down here, and again, it gets flushed down into all the rivers and all the mountains, and then it melts, etc., into the lakes and the rivers, and then it comes back to the ocean. The same thing happens again, and that's the cycle. And when you have certain situations where the winds or the heat or whatever different things that changes, so where rain is gotten to, with the basic flow that the oceans provide the clouds, which provide the rain, and that cycle is generally correct. So in terms of the practical Shabbat, it sounds like much closer to what Rabbi Lezer suggests. All right. So now the Gemara says, so the rain was munkavas kibara, right? It's like the clouds have like little holes in them, right? So that it drops water like a sieve. And it drops water like a sieve. Shnemar chashras mayim abe shpakim, right? Like the gathering of the water, right, in thick clouds. The ain by tipa ela kamali nima. And if you look at the rain or the snow, you notice that it's amazing, right? That you could see literally droplets. Right? You could literally see like when it comes down the snow, you could see the different flakes. They're not the same. And I remember once reading in a highlights magazine as a very little kid that somebody actually did a study and every snowflake looks different. I don't know if that's unique, like in terms of like ever or possibly the repeated patterns. I have no idea. But I remember that there was someone who took pictures of snowflakes before they melted, before they became sort of one thing, and they took thousands of pictures. It was like different snowflake, different pictures. It was like not the same style. So the Gemara is telling us here that the anybody tipa kamalim. It's like mamish, not even a hair's difference between the two. They're mamish right next to each other, and nevertheless they're separated. So that teaches us this is like a lesson that she teaches us that the day of rain is so amazing, so wondrous. Hashem to make all the rain, but to make it separate drops. It's like as though Hashem is creating the heavens and the earth. And now we go back to a Gemara that we had on base. Shneimar, the pasuk tells us, right? Hashem's incredible wisdom, right? No one can understand it. There's no limit on it. And we said that Hashem pours rain on the earth. And we also learned it in Ishaya, right? That Hashem, if you're not heard, if you're not known, that the God of the earth is there's no limit on His wisdom. If you remember that what we quoted before on base, we quoted the Bach. Ein cheker l'sfunas. And what was the next words? Noisein layoif kayach. Right? That Hashem gives the weak strength. So you see the word kayach in this pasuk, right? And you have the word cheker. So we take the word cheker here and we connect it back to the word cheker in the beginning. It says, cheker. And you see that there in Eiv it's discussing also matar, even though it's not in the same parak, but we then say, oh, so if you have Gedolos Adin Cheker, Hashem's wisdom is beyond, and you see that's talking about rain. And this pasuk, Valei Datam Loshemata Lake'elam L'Shema B'Yas Ha'olam. So you see Cheker, and Kayach, and Toma B'Yas Ha'olam. That tells you that the Yom HaGasham is like the Yom Sheniver B'Shemayim Va'aretz. Last time we used all these psukim to teach you what? That why Gesham is called Gevuras Gesham. And we asked the question of the Pasha that we have to go through this kind of mind-numbing psukim to figure out that rain comes down with power. I mean, open the window and you see a hard rain. Why do I need to have these psukim to teach me this? This time we're using for a bit of a different approach to make the day of rain like the day that Hashem created the heavens and the earth, which should sound familiar because we already said on Zion Amud Aleph, we talked about what? We talked about the Yom HaGasham was so great, it was like Tchias Mesim, right? The Yom HaGasham was so great that it was like the day of Mount Torah. Now we have the Yom HaGasham is so great that it is like the day Ki Yom Sheniver B'Shemayim Ba'aretz. So the takeaway from all of this is that when it rains, it's an amazing thing. Obviously, by definition, you can imagine that or you would I think could cognize this situation that the people writing this, the people thinking about this, were essentially appreciative of the rain. It wasn't something that was always dependable. And if you imagine that they're coming from places like Bavel, where they didn't necessarily, I mean, in Bavel they had the Tigris and Euphrates, but the Tigris and Euphrates themselves, why do they have so much water? Right, they have presumably springs or mountains. I don't know how they get fed. But however it is, they appreciated the rain and they appreciated it very much. Like not like a situation where like I don't know places like Seattle, right, or London, they get rain all the time. And by them, it's not such an amazing thing. But over here, it's literally being compared to the creation of the world, like Mount Torah, like Tchias Mesim. Yeah. All right. So Zot the Gemara. Yeah, and that's the thing Mar Megillah said. That's why we put in the Mashav Ruach in the bracha of Tchias Mesim, because it's that kind of a degree of amazingness. Yeah. Okay, so something more. Kiman Ozla, right? Who is this going like? Remember, if you remember, we had that. We had we're gonna have it now on two times here on Tesla Base and once on Yudam and Aleph. But we actually had that back on Vav. Right, back on Vav, we also had Kiman Ozla. The Gemara over there also said something similar. What was the lesson over there? The Gemara also said something like that. The Gemara said Kiman Ozla. I'm trying to find it right now. Um, it's not popping out on me, but I remember we had it. Yeah. Oh, here. So the bottom of the page above Manal. Kiman Ozla the Tanya of Shimon Gamil Omer. Right. Who did it go like this thing that Rabbi Shimon Gamil said? That Gisham Shiyar the Shiva Yom Zachar Zeh Atamad Man Revir Rishon Shnei Shlishis. Right. Remember we talked about the rain which comes down in a period of 7 days. They can call it the Revir Rishon, Revir Shneim, Revir Shlishis. And over there, the Gemara said, "Oh, we have to understand what's an afkamina for Revir Shnia. We understand Revir Rishona is to say the Saint Tal. Umata, we understand Revir Shlishis, right? That's when you're going to have the people starting fast if it didn't rain. What about the Revir Shnia? Right? When is that? What's an afkamina? The Gemara gave a whole bunch of afkaminas and vav and beis about it. But over there, the Gemara opened up by saying Kiman Azla. Who's it going like? So here we see Kiman Azla again. Kiman Azla. Who's it going like? Hadastiv Mashkehar Mal Yosef. Right? Hashem is feeding. He's giving the water, right, to the mountains. Me Ali Yosef. Right? Ali is like an attic. Right? We had that. We had it in Brachas. Right? What do we have in Brachas about the Kir Katana? Right? That the woman made the for Elisha, she made him about Aliyah. And they want to know what does Aliyah mean? Does it mean literally an attic or is it a chassadra? And they more go back and forth. But it sounds like from the pasuk over here that Hashem is feeding the water from his attic, which means what? What does it sound like? It sounds the water is coming from the heavens, which sounds like what? Not like Rabbi Elazar, it sounds like Rabbi Yeshua. Right? It's not coming from the Ukraine, it's not coming from the Atlantic, it's coming from the heavens, from the Rakia. So it sounds like what we're talking about here is the upper waters. So the Gemara says, it means from the attic, from the storerooms of the Rebbeinu Shalom, Rabbi Shua. Obviously, this is going to Rabbi Shua. So how does Rabbi Lezer answer? Rabbi Lezer, given the stock once the water sort of evaporates from the oceans and comes into the clouds and goes up into the heavens, that's what we mean when we say Mali Yosef. It doesn't mean in a literal sense, in the Hashem's storms of water upstairs. No, it means that it's coming from the heavens because the clouds are in the heavens. And Rabbi Lezer proves it. So Rabbi Lezer says, if you don't say this, then right over there, the pasuk says there in the Torah, there in Pashki Savai, that Hashem is going to give I'm forgetting how the pasuk is not jumping out of me. So the pasuk says, Avav v'afar. No, I'm not remembering the pasuk. Does somebody have the pasuk there in the Gemara? What does it say? Yitain Hashem nu. Eshmatar artzach avak v'afar. Yeah. So Yitain Hashem eshmatar artzach avak v'afar means what Hashem is giving you water on the ground, but there's a curse over there. So what is He giving you? Avak v'afar. He's giving you dirt. He's giving you dust. Right? It's a curse. So the what do you call it? The Gemara is saying that Rabbi Lezer is challenging and saying, how's it going to go that the dust is coming from the heavens? Dust doesn't come from the heavens. You know, dust comes from the earth. So how's it happening that Yitan Hashem's afar? How's that going to work? Only going to work if what? If you imagine the idea that the things that come up from the ground, that Hashem now makes a dust storm, that can still be considered. It's coming from the heavens. So you have a kash with me on the rain. I'm telling you, it's coming from the Atlantic and it comes clouds, and that's how it is. That's it's called the Mali Yosef. It's not a big deal. That's a pretty strong answer from Rabbi Lezer, yeah. So says the Gemara. Yeah. So the Eloi came back. Of a government, Hashem Hechem Mishkachas Lo Lekevin the Madi Lahasam and Hashem Karle Achanam became the Saga Lahasam Mali Yosef Karle. So just like by the sand and the dust and all that, when Hashem is going to, sort of rain that down, Nebuch, in a situation where the Jews don't deserve rain, instead they're going to get the sandstorms and the dust storms, and that's nevertheless still considered Hashemayim. So too, when the waters sort of coagulated, they become clouds, and they go into the heavens. That's also considered coming down from Dali Yosef or the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's fine. Now I have another Kiman Oslo. So more Kiman Oslo. Everyone knows this. Pasuk in Tehillim we say, right? Hashem is Kenes Kanim Ayam, right? He makes a heap of the water. Nice and by Tzara is Tehillim, so he puts into the storehouses the deep, meaning the depths of the water. So the nade, the idea of a nade, we see the nade, we find it in the by the Shira, right? That the waters became like a heap by the Kriyas Yamsuf. We also find it in Yeshua, right? When the Jews are passing through the Yarden, it says nade echad, it becomes like a big heap. The waters, right? But there was only one side, right? By the Jordan, right? The downflow waters that were already past the Jews, that kept them flowing down. So there was nothing left there. But the waters coming down were stopped. So they'll keep getting higher and higher. Plus it says it was seen by all the indigenous other nations of Canaan. They all realized, wow, what a miracle is happening now. Yeah, so Zot the Gemara. So the Gemara is asking now, whose is going better like Rabbi Lezer or Yeshua? This idea of a heap of rain, where Hashem is putting Nesim Ba'itzarais time, he puts in his storehouses the deep. Where does it sound like the water's coming from? From the ground, right? Which sounds like who? Blezer. So says the Gemara, Migarm Latarshi Ismail Bar, right? Tohemais, right? What causes the storehouses to be filled with Tvua? Right? Where do we have bar being Tvua? V'yitzbu bar, right? And Pasuk says in Parashat Miketz, right? That they're going to get sustenance. They're going to get provisions from Yosef. So the bar is the provisions, right? The wheat. So what causes the storehouses to be filled with the wheat? So Haimis, obviously the deep, right? The water. Kirab Lezer, obviously that's going to fit more with Lezer. It sounds like the water is coming from the ground, not from the heavens. Rabbi Shua, how does Rabbi Shua answer that? We turn the page now to Yudam and Aleph. That's talking about by the Bria of the world. By the Bria of the world, that's what we're discussing over there. In other words, when the whole world was full of Mayim, right? The Hashem had to split it out. Hashem kinsed and Hashem moved the waters around and sort of, as Rashi says, was machnas it into one place, and then he was machnas in Mayim benoid shenasanim b'atzars. Right? He put the water into like a storehouse and to store it in the heavens. That's what it means. Right? That's why he took sort of boundaries on the water, and they took the waters and placed it in the heavens. That's what it means. But in generally, the water is not coming from below; it's coming from on high. That's Rabbi Shua's answer. Fine. I have a few zaytig limud about the wonder of Eretz Yisrael. Does the Gemara? Taner Abanan. Eretz Yisrael never is techila. Eretz Yisrael was created first. And the rest of the world followed afterwards. From our Shua's night topic, this is not relevant, but it is within Eretz Yisrael, right? That we say what was created first. You have to be there to understand. Yeah, so Eretz Yisrael was created first, and then the world followed. Shneimar, how do we know? Because the pasuk says, Eretz v'chutzos, right? It was Eretz here is a reference to Eretz Yisrael, and v'chutzos is the chutz la'aretz. So it sounds like the Eretz is first, in creation, and then the chutz la'aretz afterwards. Eretz Yisrael, mashkes HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmai. Eretz Yisrael, Hashem feeds it himself. Hashem gives it to drink itself. But the rest of the world, Hashem gives them to drink. Right? That's reminds us of the more Shabbos Kufna and Vav. The more over there, remember Yechon, a very famous line, "Ein Mazal Yisrael." The more that goes through all the different mazalas and all the different controls that people are born at different times, have different inclinations and proclivities. Why? Because of the fact that they're born in a mazel over this or mazel over that. But Rabbi Yechon says, "Ein Mazal Yisrael." The Jewish people, it's not that there isn't mazel. I'm not sure that he's saying that there's no mazel, but more that it's not controlled by it. Right? The Jews are beyond mazel. The Jews are beyond mazel. Hashem directs them directly. Bless you. Yeah, exactly more. Eretz Yisrael sheisa megishamim v'chol ha'olam kulay mitamtzis. Right? Eretz Yisrael gets the direct rain, and the rest of the world, mitamsis, gets from the residue of what Eretz Yisrael doesn't have. Right? Eretz Yisrael first drinks, first gets the rain and the rest of the world afterwards. Again, it doesn't mean in a literal sense in terms of the rainy season, but more in the sense of fundamental, right? It's Eretz Yisrael that's being looked at first. If you remember the Rashi that we had the other day, right? We had where was the Rashi? We had a Rashi on Testament Aleph. Rashi in Testament Aleph talked about Mata B'Shul Yochid. So one of the examples Rashi gave was Oy Shador Be'ir Shekula Nachem. The person is living in a city where it's all going. He's the only Yid that the rain is coming to split him, right? So that's the same sort of idea. Eretz Yisrael's first. The Jews are first ratious. Yisrael Shanik ratious, and the rest of the world is, in this sense, an afterthought, but not in a, yeah, but not in a literal sense. In other words, it could be raining in other places. I don't know when the rainy seasons are, but fundamentally, who's Hashem caring about? Hashem's caring about his loyal ambassadors. Yeah. So again, what's the proof? Again, the same place. It's fine. Mashallah Adam right? The person is churning his cheese. Right? He takes the prime stuff that's his main takeout from this churning of the cheese, and it leaves over the rest. So the same thing will be in terms of the rest of the way the world is being treated. Yeah. So this idea that Blazer said that the rain water, right, which is coming from the kindness, is very salty. But when it gets up into the heavens, it gets nice and sweet. How did he know? He learned this out from a pasuk. There are two psukim, both in Tehillim, and if you look at them, you'll see there's only one letter difference. Cheshchas mayim avishkakim, right? The darkened waters by the clouds. Cheshchas mayim avishkakim, right? And it says chashras. What's the difference? One is a ches, one's a chaf. Sorry, one's a resha, one's a chaf. But they're literally otherwise seemingly the exact same psukim. So what is this teaching us? These two mikras in there in Tehillim. What it's teaching us is shakar chaf v'shad yareish mekar bechach shiras. Right, then that you should read it that way, which teaches you then that the idea of the fact that these rainwaters becoming sweet when they go into the clouds, because really they should be salty given that they're coming from the ocean. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I understand that Rashi and Tesis, this is another Amud where all the Tesis didn't have the Pirish, I think, except for one. Yeah, all the rest of them have Pirish. And Tesis says, "Kom shamayim ba'anonim miskashrim." Right? Tesis says that they become right. Rashi is not as clear, maybe. So Tesis says that the chaf is miskashrim. Right? It becomes more kosher, more easy. Shananim shaisim. The clouds are drinking. It'll be safe. Heimam tikim ba'am, and that's how it becomes sweet in the clouds. So you can see from here how the salted water becomes sweet when it comes into the clouds. Fine. So Zadig Marva Bishua, what does he do with this? Bishua Bahani Kroy my Darshibu. How does he darshan of these cheshkas mayim, chashas mayim, the gathering, the darkness of the water? Like, what does he do with this? Samarlo Kiha the Chiasi Rav Dimi. Remember we said about Rav Dimi used to come from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, etc. So here we have an example. Rav Dimi, when he came from Eretz Yisrael, he came to Bavel. Amri Maravi. This is what he said. He says, Nahar Anani Zihir Mai. Right? If you're going to have light cloud, then not much rain. It's the Iran, right? It's going to come very little. Kashoy Hanani, if it's going to be a lot of rain if it's dark clouds. Kiman Ozla, now we have another version of the Kiman Ozla. Kiman Ozla, the tiny Mayim Alyanim, but Mayim Rahim Tlim. Who's this going like? Rabbi Lezer B'Shua, this idea that we say in the Brisa that the Mayim Alyanim are totally, right? They're hanging on Hashem's word. And the waters of the rain are coming for the fruits. Right, as we have in the pasuk says that from the fruit of his hands, right, the earth will be sustained. Kiman says it's like Rabbi Shua. This is like Rabbi Shua, right? Because it sounds like what the pasuk is saying that b'mayim rahim tzulim, right? They're hanging up in the heavens on his word. So it sounds more like Rabbi Shua that's coming from the heavens, not like Rabbi Lezer that's coming from the ocean. Rabbi Lezer, who b'ma'aseh yada shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Lezer says no, it's coming from the ma'aseh yada of Hashem. When we're saying literally, it doesn't mean that it's coming from the storehouses in the heavens, but the ma'aser of Hashem. That also can be referenced here, like in heaven, but it's literally coming from the earth, from the ocean. Rabbi Lezer, he b'mas yad shakash baruch hu desif. Rabbi Shmuel Levi kol an kulam mitamtis kanedim ha'mishoysa. Let's just finish the 2,000. Shmuel Levi says that the whole world drinks from the residue of Gan Eden. Right? We said that everything is drinking from the residue of Eretz Yisrael. So now we're saying even further. What's before Eretz Yisrael? Gan Eden. Shenemar v'nahar yotzei me'eden, and the pasuk over there says v'nahar yotzei me'eden lahashkes es hagan misham yiparei, and from there it's going to be divided out further into the world. So Tana mitams is base core shisa tirkak, right? So again, I'm going to see a little bit more on this tomorrow. That the levels of rain, the first place where it's going is the Gan Eden, and then it's coming further to Eretz Yisrael, then further to the world, etc. All right, Shkai.